We know that when we get people right, we get business right. So I'd like to welcome you back to my podcast that focuses on 3 areas I specialise in: leadership, performance, and culture. You'll hear my guests talking about their experiences and expertise, and will be providing thought-provoking insights around putting the human factor back into business. Each conversation will be accompanied by a free downloadable guide to save the strain on your memory, and resources that will make it easier to put the great ideas we discuss into action. I'm your host, Lisa, psychologist, psychotherapist, and founder of It's Time for Change, and I thrive on conversations that make a difference. So reach out to me. My details are in the show notes along with the resources. Grab a cuppa, sit back, and enjoy. I'm pleased to welcome Robin Rogers, Director of Economy and Place from Oxfordshire County Council, to join me. Thanks for coming, Robin.
Good afternoon. Really pleased to be here. This is all very new to me, so forgive me if I'm a little bit nervous in front of the camera.
No, you're looking good. Looking very smart with your tie on. So today we're going to be talking about what it takes to be an employer of choice. And that came about because you contributed to the Leadership Insights for a Changing World ebook for OBS 2025. And we can put a link to that in the show notes so listeners can read that for themselves. But you talked about the council's ambition to be an employer of choice. And I was intrigued by those words. And I thought, I wonder what that term, employer of choice, actually means to you.
Yeah, sure. I have to also apologise for my enormous coffee cup as well. So I talked in the piece about public service and why that's important to me and why that's important to the people who work with us here at the council. So we clearly want people, we want to be employer of choice because we want people to come to work for us, but we also want this to be a place where people who want to be here are here. We want it to be an active choice. People are going to thrive. They need to share our values, share our principles, share our passion for public services, share our passion for place, as well as the residents of Oxfordshire. And that's what we mean by employer of choice. Is this a place where you'd recommend others to work? Is this a place where you come to work knowing that you can make a difference, to deliver the difference that you want to make, that motivates you, that keeps that momentum through the day, that you can understand that what you're doing is making the difference to people's lives? And that's really hard to do every day. And sometimes to see the link between the bit of work you're doing and the outcome for residents. For some of our staff, you can see that very directly. If you're a frontline member of staff, if you're a firefighter, social worker, you can see that right away. You can see the impact, and we want to make that as valuable as possible. But clearly, many staff are working on projects that can take years to come to fruition, are working in our support services, working in long-term planning functions. It can be harder to see that, and we want to make that really visible so that every member of staff understands what part they're playing.
So why is that so important now? Is that something that's always been important, or do you feel it's as an ambition that's kind of come to a sort of greater priority now for kind of local government and for Oxfordshire more broadly?
So it has been always important, but particularly important now. The demand pressures and the diverse demand pressures that we're seeing, the different ways that people interact with public services, the different needs we're seeing, the pressures we're seeing around adult social care, around special educational needs, around demand in our housing markets. It increasingly means we've got more complex work to do, work that's under higher pressure, work that needs to be innovative and different. So we need to work that's harder, frankly, I believe. And so we need to also at the same time then work harder to demonstrate that we are still that employer of choice, that place where people can come to make a difference.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying about actually everything just feels harder. It just feels, and I was having a conversation with someone recently about whether that's because we're getting older or whether actually just the pace of change, how intense everything feels. It's almost like people feel very squeezed, and either they're being set very challenging projects to work on, or just what's expected of them in terms of their own capacity to deliver just feels very full on at the moment.
I think that's true, and yes, it's always true that things are intense and pressurized, and yes, perhaps there's a feature of us getting older, but the world is increasingly, I think, complex in the way that we can deliver, and the opportunities to take advantage of the digital world, of AI, of different partnership relationships, of new ideas around commerciality, different methods of investing. It does mean that things are different and more complex.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes quite a lot for organisations to actually lean into that complexity and start to intentionally get their heads around it. Like, how do we make sense of this and make sense of it for our workforce? So let's explore what being an employer of choice actually looks like in practice, because I always like to get kind of beyond the words and the terms we sort of throw around and actually think a bit more about what it means. So what do people often misunderstand about what makes an organisation attractive as an employer today?
So I think I probably touched on this to start with, but for me, it's the meaningfulness is what's most important. People coming into the organisation who can understand our purpose, can understand where they would fit within that. We find in Oxfordshire we are an attractive place to come. People want to come here because of the things that we're doing, and it's a hard place to sign up. It can be a hard place to sign up to work. We have an expensive cost of living in Oxfordshire. It's just that's just the fact. So people don't generally come here for the money. Clearly, everybody needs to pay their rent, pay a mortgage, support their loved ones. So it is not immaterial, and we need to work as hard as possible to make sure that the package that we put together for people works and can attract people. But that's not the thing. That's not the primary reason to work here, because there are other local authorities you can work in, or other bits of the public sector. Indeed, we've got lots of people with very marketable private sector skills. So that can't be the one thing in an employment market that's really hot in Oxfordshire. There's significant parts of the workforce that we need to work harder to access our the kind of hot parts of the economy. That is absolutely true, but we have very low unemployed, so that's not what's driving people to come and work for us. We've got to be that purpose driven. Do people understand the meaning? Do people understand what their part is? For me, and I would say this, as you say, my role as Director of Economy and Place, very much focused on how Oxfordshire grows, changes and develops, how our place functions, considering the environment, the economy, and the well-being of our residents. For me, it's really important for a place-based services that people really understand the story of our place, what the vision is for the future, what it is that makes Oxfordshire special across our natural environment, across our vibrant communities, across our economic opportunities, education, cultural opportunities. That's a really important part of what you can get from an employer of choice. I'd obviously also talk about the flexibility as well. And flexibility doesn't just mean working from home. It means, is there a really high quality collaboration environment for when you are working together, and is that happening frequently? Are you confident that you will see people and you will access? Also, are you able to work from home when that's appropriate, so we can tap into a wider market and support people's lifestyles? But also, are we creating an environment which works for us as the employer and the residents we serve, but also gets the best out of people who also have complex lives, carrying responsibilities, other things going on? Are we making sure that we're not allowing bureaucracy and rules to get in the way of flexibility that can get the most out of people? Are we allowing people to change around their roles, both but change around their roles, the opportunity to progress in their career, or I don't want to say not progress, what's the opposite of progress in their career, or make a change in their career, spend a time doing something different, maybe take a step back for a period, but not allow that to mean that's it, you're off that train, you can't make a change in the future. Opportunities to step up, secondments into leadership, opportunities to work with partners, opportunities to work outside the organisations to do things differently. It's that level of flexibility is what we've got to see in the round, and I think we're good at that. I think we perhaps don't quite shout about it as much. We perhaps don't celebrate that as much as the offer that it is. But I think when we talk to our staff, that's an aspect that they really value. And I suppose my last point is then a kind of compassionate workplace, a place that is really driven about what it's doing, but also really cares about its staff. And somebody, mentor, once told me, if you're going to be a manager, if you're going to be a leader, the people who you work for, they're going to have kids, they're going to get sick, and their parents are going to die. And once you kind of get into that mindset, that's going to happen, and we need to be the best that we can at those moments in people's lives, because otherwise they won't stay loyal to us. And you've got to think about what the long term is, not the immediate demands in front of you, and be the best that you can in those moments.
I like what you were mentioning about you use the word stories, and I think when people care about people for who people are and the experience they have, and you actually hear people's stories and you invest in them. So the whole, it falls into your role thinking about experience. You've just described that brilliantly. But actually, what people experience day to day, what their lived experiences, and whether that's to do with them being a part of a community, whether that's being part of an organization where, lots of organizations are great at saying, this is what it's like to work with us. And then the actual lived experience is vastly different. It sounds to me as if you're sort of quite aware of that in terms of making sure that that lived experience is as meaningful as it can be.
I think so. I think you've got to model that as a leader. You've got to
Mm,
expect it and hold your people to account for those experiences. What you say there makes me think about then the very different stories that we have within the organisations, the diversity of the people that work for us, that come from different backgrounds, from different professional backgrounds, from a big international workforce, um, uh, all kinds of different ages, and to really understand where people are coming from, and to be
mm,
allow people and enable people in the workforce to tell their own story if that's what they want to do, or not tell their story if
yeah,
that's not what they. But people to show up to the I'm not really sure I totally sign up to the bringing your whole self to work, because I'm not sure everybody does or
no,
everybody wants to, but to be able to show up with the self that you want to,
yeah,
and that allows you to do what you want to do at work, is so important to people's sense of safety, sense of well-being, which is what enables you to
yeah,
get the most out of people. And we have working in local government is such a fascinating experience. The opportunity to do the kind of jobs I do, where you can see across the range of our responsibility as local government, is really a conglomeration of maybe 100, maybe 150 different services, with dozens of different professionals: architects, engineers, social workers, teachers, fire officers, accountants, IT
mm,
people, quantity surveyors, environmental health officers, town planners, engineers, dozens of professions, and with incredibly passionate people in those professions, and allowing people to grow that passion. I clearly want my rail specialist team to be in here in Oxfordshire working on our rail investment priorities. Of course they do. But I also know that they'll do that better if they've got the freedom to uh, join in regional work, to spend time in London at national conferences, to have that influence on behalf of Oxfordshire, but
mm,
also to allow them to have that growth. And it's never okay. It's never okay to be. I mean, clearly there are priorities of the day and there are things we can do, but it's never okay to be saying people know we're too busy to do development. It's like, we're too busy not to do development. That's the space that people can grow into, and where that's really important when we've got that whole range of services is that you need to be open to that diversity as a leader, because that's not necessarily, you don't necessarily understand the needs of these different professions, even different backgrounds. You've got to accept that. You've got to listen to what your people want in that space.
yeah, and probably more so actually in working in local government because, as you say, there are so many different areas, so many different roles, and I like the kind of message coming through from what you just said, and also what you said earlier about sort of rethinking career paths in terms of, you don't have to think about sort of traditional models. Someone might want to change what they're doing. And I think it's about, hearing you talk, it feels as if there's a sort of a challenge to tradition and a challenge to kind of status quo. We don't just, people aren't just too busy to go and do development, or they're not sticking on this track of career development because that's how we've always done it. It's actually what's right for that individual, because if we get it right for the individual, it is right for the organisation. And it ties back into what you were saying about if you look after people and their experience is meaningful to them in terms of their career path or in terms of their development, that's your marketing. So when you said at the start of this conversation that, perhaps we don't celebrate enough the good stuff and what you stand for, which I think a lot of organisations fall into that trap. Actually, when people go out and about and they're developing and they're connecting with other people, of course, they get to hear the great things about Oxfordshire.
I think that's, yeah, I think that's right. And what we have is the opportunity to be that inclusive employer, and to be the pipeline and opportunity to bring people into the workforce who wouldn't necessarily get into these these roles. So we've been investing in, alongside our graduate recruitment program, we've been investing in management apprenticeships for people who haven't been through university, and some fantastic results there. We've got broad apprenticeships across the piece. We're going to do more work. We're actively planning more work on really targeting, thinking about those groups furthest in the workforce, or who are most disabled to access the workforce, and how we can benefit from their talent. And we won't necessarily keep everybody. I talk about some of our really marketable people that we bring in areas like IT and digital, that we're going to end up training apprenticeship and probably going to lose them. And that's okay. That's okay, actually, because we get them for a few years, and we brought people into the workforce who wouldn't necessarily have made that journey, and then they're contributing in the economy or to other parts of the public sector. I think that's okay. And we've got great opportunities for people, as you say, who are changing their life path. We've got fantastic flexible opportunities. That I think about things like clerks to school governors or registrars. These are kind of roles that you can do at the weekend in the evening. And I've got a couple of colleagues who've come in that way because they had caring responsibilities and they wanted that kind of role, and then have then been able to get it, and then use that as a platform to then get effectively back into the workforce, take on other roles. And that's a brilliant pipeline. Also, people towards, I'm thinking really hard about this as the work we do with our existing teams, and how we keep our professional skills and experience longer. The career pathways tend to be a kind of escalator, and you get to the escalator and then you fall off it. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be that. If we can find the mechanism so people aren't financially disincentivized, for some of our professional colleagues, a period of time where they can let go of management responsibilities and go back to professional delivery is often extremely welcomed, both by the organisation, because we get to benefit from that experience, and the individual, because they can maintain the work that they do and got a passionate for, with a different kind of pressure and job experience.
So you're touching on some of what I'm about to ask you anyway, but I'm interested about, what does good people leadership look like then in your context? So I talk a lot about leadership in different organizations, but I'm just thinking about, in your particular context, what do you think good leadership actually looks like?
I think you've got to be authentic. You've got to spend the time. You've got to be present. You've got to show up, and you've got to make those opportunities for others to see. The places start with a place of failure. Places like the people I failed to work successfully with are people I'm not spending enough time with. That's both people who work here and partners elsewhere. It's always the 2 minutes before the meeting and the 2 minutes after the meeting that really matter. And actually being present in there, showing up, being available afterwards, so you can have those moments of connectivity of leadership, to have the conversation that you couldn't have in the meeting, to offer counsel, to take feedback, is really, really critical. I heard a bit of a cookie cutter fridge magnet leadership piece from a very valued colleague just before Christmas. Leadership is hosting your own party every day, and for some of us that's exhausting, because I don't want to. Sometimes I want to put my head down and go and sit at my desk and not. And those are the days to work at home. Because when you're here, you've got to be. It doesn't mean you have to be sunny, falsely positive, but you've got to be present and available.
I think you raise a really good point there, because, and what I'm curious to know is about how you support leaders and managers to be sort of consistent and human-centered, because I think there's a real pressure on people for every day to be all singing or dancing day. And as we said right at the start of this conversation, it feels like the pressure's on because the world is becoming busier, noisier, messier, more complex. And actually, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is sustainable performance. So it's not about just getting people to perform brilliantly at any cost. It's about, how do we do this in a nurturing way so that people can sustain that long term, because it works for them as well as the organization. So how do you kind of plan for that in terms of the managers and the leaders within your organization, to think about looking after themselves as well as the people that they're leading?
Yeah, so there's a cycle, isn't there, in terms of where you get into, if you're joining an organization as a leader, if you're an established leader, if you're a very established leader, that it's difficult to pick it up at different points. But there's definitely something about, I think, sharing your personal story, making sure your personal narrative is really clear to the extent that you want to, but and allowing others to do the same, so that you can see where you are in your different cycles. So I've had to learn to share a bit more than I perhaps naturally would. Like when I got married, my colleagues were like, "Oh, back in a fortnight, I'm getting married." Like, what do you mean back in a fortnight? I'm getting back at the weekend. And they're horrified. Why I wouldn't have shared this? And actually bought me a very nice gift. But that's actually important to understand why I might, they kind of probably did need to know that, because why I might not have been entirely focused for the previous few months.
Yes.
Well, it is important. A colleague of mine, well, a boss of mine, who opened up to me once about some health problems. Like, okay, I understand now. I now understand why sometimes I can't connect to you.
Yeah.
And now that makes sense. I thought that was me, and in fact it was us. And that was, again, probably a little bit more than that individual probably wanted to share. But that kind of made sense. So in terms of sustainable performance, so if you've got that relationship, and that doesn't necessarily mean being friends. I know I'm open to friends, but that's not what we're here. That's not the primary reason why we're here. But it does mean about being human. So you have a relationship of kindness, not necessarily niceness, but but kindness, so that you can have that sustainable performance. So you can have those challenging conversations to hold ourselves and each other to account, to keep going through those in more difficult times. And I think that's really important to sustainability. It's kind of easy to power through, get things done when everything's going really well. It's more difficult when inevitably things are harder, things are more challenging.
And I think that really highlights the need for human-centered leadership, which is, and people understanding people's stories and their experience and caring about that. And I think that's
people spend so much time in their careers, and I hope this is changing, but people spend so much time being scared or afraid, this kind of thing, scared or ashamed or embarrassed about things that they shouldn't be, because people shouldn't be making them feel like that, or probably they aren't in that position because that's not how people actually think about them, because everybody else is just trying to get on their days as well. You need to kind of try and not do that, because that's not productive. That's bad energy. That makes people do things slow, which doesn't mean not holding people to account, which doesn't mean not having clear objectives and as a team working really hard. But when you see the best teams work, and I'm not a great one for sporting analogies, but again, look, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have a bit of personal narrative. My oldest son's a rugby player. He's age 11, and you can see there in the brilliant coaching model in the local team that he plays for, really sophisticated leadership, and they really push the team really hard, and they really want them to do. But they know them all individually. They really care. They start from they push them hard during matches, and then the kind of the wash up is always positive about where we can build from here. And it's the where was I going with that? It's the energy that leadership brings and imparts to the team, the challenging but caring.
So I guess, with everything you've just said, because I think actually I hear, and I think I'm hoping the narrative's changing slightly, so you get some kind of the hardcore traditional leaders who are like, we don't want all this kind of caring nonsense because it means we're being too soft on people, too lenient on people, we're not, in control enough, and so on. And actually, I think you just described brilliantly the fact that we can be compassionate and kind, but also still hold people to account and still have high standards. And I think that's where we see really good leaders who are human-centered, but still keep the business goals kind of front of mind and have those expectations. And I guess, in terms of thinking about good leadership and good management, that's going to directly impact your retention, your recruitment. So what are the biggest challenges you're facing at the moment in terms of attracting talent? Because you're wanting to be, and you're kind of talking about being a great place to work, but what's the biggest challenge?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier that this is a high cost of living place, so we do have to be cognizant of that we do have, in the relatively densely populated southeast, people have got choices about where they can go. So we do need to be really cognizant of that. There is certainly scarcity in some specific specific professions. Certainly in my world, planners, strategic planners, engineers. There's a scarcity in general, and we're not training enough people to do these jobs to start with. But they're also extremely marketable. I mean, all my planners and engineers can absolutely go and get a job in the private sector, probably for more money. Now, whether it's more satisfying, whether it's more mission driven, is a different question, and that's what we've got to project. And actually, I really do want that revolving door. I want people to spend time in both parts of probably best not see it as two parts of the sector, but the widest possible experience really brings something to us and brings people to colleagues elsewhere. And I think that scarcity in priority professions is something that we can address through understanding some of the visibility of what we do. Okay, if I started my career again, it would have been quite helpful if I'd have qualified as a chartered surveyor quite early on in my career, but I didn't actually know that profession existed until 10 years after I bet. And it turns out then all the senior people I work with now in my particular field are all chartered. Who knew that? Well, obviously some people knew that. I didn't know that. Equally, town planning. Town planning is the most fascinating job to do. And quite a lot of people are aware of it if they do a geography degree and go on and do that. But you don't have to do a geography degree for town planning. There's all kinds of other skills that you can bring. Equally, things like our architects and archaeologists. Who knew? And these are all professions, and we can do work with that. We can do more, more sharing with people outside of the workforce, young people, into what are the opportunities, what can come in there, and then I suppose it's keeping that brand visibility of what's best about us, and making sure that our systems and processes are as best as they can be, as best as they could be to onboard people. The last thing you want to do is do all that work to attract people and then lose people in the last week of recruitment because you've spent too long on the process and they've taken the other offer they've got. It's heartbreaking when that happens. Heartbreaking / infuriating. Depends what kind of day I'm having. So you've got to get those systems and processes as slick as possible, and that's a challenge to all big organisations where you're trying to do an open, compliant, and authentic recruitment process at the same time, not making it say onerous and bureaucratic. You actually put people off in the process.
I like what you're talking about in terms of the mission, and you don't necessarily pay as much as other organisations, but people will work with you because they believe in what you're doing. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of what makes Oxfordshire a great place to work and everything you stand for. And I think it reminds me of a conversation I've had a couple of times with Hitachi Energy, who I do some work with their grads. And their grads are exceptionally clever people in terms of the whole energy focus. And they have said a couple of times they could have got work elsewhere, using their expertise and got paid more, but they've chosen to work at Hitachi Energy because of what it's all about. And they want to be involved in something that's about creating, good for the future of our planet. And I think when people, it goes back to you talking around, what is it? Why is it so good to work for the council? Why is it so attractive? How do you look after people? What's in it for them? Understand that mission and the purpose, you can't underestimate that, can you?
100%. And I want to, and I think in some areas we are achieving the kind of energy, mission-driven experience that you get in a startup, in a dynamic young business, with the stability and scale and ability to do things of our large organisations. And in some of in our innovation service, for example, Innovate Oxfordshire, which is focused on how we can reform public service and form new commercial partnerships. In our climate action team, which I genuinely think is nationally leading in taking action on climate change and climate and action towards climate resilience, we've absolutely got that energy, ability to get things done, understanding how to influence things, commercial mindset. So we could only do more of that.
So I guess, because I'm just thinking about how, again, going back to the kind of the link between, because I think you're in a very unique position compared to most people I have on this podcast around being a councillor, and I'm curious about the kind of connection between the council and as an organisation to work with and the community, and how you shape your identity as an employer. So how do you encourage people to come and work with you rather than taking their skills elsewhere where they potentially can get paid more, or do things differently. So is there anything else that you think that you haven't mentioned that would be good for potentially other organizations, leaders of other places to think, actually, this is a slightly different way of thinking about it?
Well, I think that, I mean, we are, because we are a council, and many businesses and other organisations will share this. We are very much place based. It's got to be about Oxfordshire, Oxford communities, Oxford residents. I love hearing. I love going somewhere where a member of staff or a councillor will show me around, or just we're seeing something, but they'll also be pointing out things in the local community that they really love and are passionate about. People love their communities in Oxfordshire, and rightly so. Now, not all of our staff, by any measure, come from Oxfordshire. They absolutely don't need to. But it's for us then, and it's for those member staff who are here to help share that experience of what it means to be here in Oxfordshire, what it means to be a resident in Oxfordshire, what are the challenges and opportunities, what are the things people are passionate about. We did a great it was scrappy. It was deliberately scrappy initiative a couple of years ago where we got staff to record, I think, what do we call it, My Oxfordshire. So just 30-second minute videos on here's the vibrant Cali. Somebody did the Cali, right, the places I really love because vibrant, amazing opportunities to shop, great food. People did bits of countryside. This is a place I really love. I walk my dogs here. I used to walk here with my late husband, whatever it was. All kinds of just this is my Oxfordshire. This is why I care about this place, and be able to share that with each other. That was great. I think that's having that sense of place and why we're here, the story of what we're about, is absolutely key, and that's got to be key to all businesses, whether you're place based or not. And you mentioned one in particular, and we see that in some of our great businesses in Oxfordshire. BMW is an outstanding business in terms of the passion that their colleagues at Plant Mini have got in Cowley, and you can see it in the way that they behave and the pride that they show. There's a Mini on the roof of the building. Senior management, senior management turn up in the kind of branded gear that's the gear of the workforce, because they're really proud of what they do. They want to tell you about their work. I think of we did a very different kind of business. We did an event down at Bremont Watches in Henley, which is a manufacturer of incredible high-end luxury watches, which is is interesting. It's an important business, but the passion and the heritage of that business and why it matters that they're in Henley and how that associates with then the product they create. Those are the stories. I can't do one more. Fantastic restaurant cafe down in Wallingford that really works hard to use local produce, really varied menu, employs local people. And to hear that business talk about why it matters that they're there, what the link is to their place, is, gosh, I want to work. Well, I want to eat. I want to be a customer there, but I also want to work there. I want to support them. I want to be a customer. I want to be a corporate customer. Have a corporate relationship. And hearing those stories that people tell about how they started, why it's there, why it's important, absolutely critical to giving that sense of why people will join you, why they'll stay.
It reminds me of you describing that, of a conversation I had with Sally Naunton at Bray Healthcare in Farringdon, and about the connection with that business and that community and how they were kind of meshed together so closely. I absolutely love that, what it means to work here, my Oxfordshire. I think if people from listening to this took that idea and just thought, what does it mean to work here, wherever they work? I love the fact that you said it's scrappy, because I think, again, people can be too obsessed with everything looking too slick and too perfect. And actually, going back to your earlier point about being authentic as being really important, people relate to stuff that feels more real. So actually having something that's a bit more clunky but much more engaging the message gets through loud and clear. So I really like that example. I'd like to see more people doing that. Imagine if every business has some sort of video about what it really means to work here, and hear people's stories again. I think that'd be really powerful.
Yeah.
So I'm going to finish with one question to you, Robin, because we're out of time. So if culture starts with the leaders, what's the next move you believe will make the biggest difference in becoming an employer of choice?
So you fired me up. So I'm going to say show up.
Nice. Tell me more.
Oh, you want to? I thought I was just writing down one word. You want to? It's that point that we touched on earlier about just recognizing that every day as a leader, your job is to show up and bring that leadership. That's what you're paid for. So don't resent it, embrace it, and enjoy it.
I love that. And actually, when people aren't very, I was having a conversation before we recorded this today with someone who was talking about a lot of leaders are in positions where they don't know, they don't feel confident about leading. So as well as embracing it and enjoying the challenge, being open to the fact that you've got a lot to learn and embracing that journey rather than feeling threatened by it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Robin. I have very much enjoyed talking to you. I felt I could have gone for another half an hour. I've got loads of other things going around in my mind that I would quite like to ask you about, but that'll be for another time. So you've left us with a lot to think about. I'm quite excited by some of your ideas you've shared, and your passion definitely comes across in what you talk about. So thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Great fun.
If you enjoyed listening to this conversation, there are 3 things I invite you to do. First, click the link in the show notes to download the resources for this episode. Secondly, help me extend the reach of this podcast by leaving a quick review on Apple or wherever you listen. And please share this episode with your colleagues so that you can discuss what resonates for your team. And finally, as usual, I invite you to reach out to me on LinkedIn or through my website so that we can keep the conversation flowing. I know listeners often say they're keen to implement some of the key takeaways, but sometimes find it tough without guidance or extra support. If that's you, drop me a line and let's chat. My brand spanking new website is live in January, ready for 2026, so be sure to check out itstimefforchange.co.uk, where you will find a whole heap more to support you to reflect on and develop your own practice. And while you're there, join my mailing list to stay up to date with bespoke support services like my retained partnerships, where I'm by your side through all things leadership, culture and performance. Feel free to reach out if you want to know more. I'm a great sounding board for challenges and ideas for development, so grab all the details you need from the show notes. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you and to welcoming you to the next episode coming soon. Join me then.